The Dark Fleet opened fire with everything it had. Space became a web of energy-draining beams and exotic weapons that seemed to twist reality itself. The 4 Imperial ships, their power levels already critically low, struggled through the gauntlet toward their target. The Constellation was the first to fall. A concentrated barrage from 3 dark dreadnoughts overwhelmed her weakened defenses, and Captain Martinez's ship went completely dark. It continued to drift forward on momentum alone, its crew trapped inside a lifeless hull. Constellation down, Amelia reported grimly. Continue the attack? The Starfire and New Athens were taking devastating damage, their hulls scarred by weapons that seemed to eat through armor plating like acid. But they pressed on, their crews displaying the courage that had built the Empire. New Athens to flagship. Harrison's voice was barely audible over the static. I'm reading total power failure in 10 minutes. Making our run now. Amelia watched as Harrison's ship accelerated to ramming speed, aiming directly for the largest of the central node vessels. The Dark Fleet concentrated their fire on the New Athens, trying to drain her remaining power before she could reach her target. But Harrison had shut down everything except life support and engines, giving the energy absorbers nothing to feed on. The collision was spectacular. The New Athens struck the Dark Dreadnought at a significant fraction of light speed, her kinetic energy overwhelming even the enemy's exotic defenses. Both ships disappeared in a brilliant flash that momentarily outshone the system's primary star. Direct hit on primary node, Lieutenant Reyes reported. The enemy formation is changing. Indeed it was. The destruction of the central node vessel had disrupted the Dark Fleet's coordination network. Ships that had moved with perfect synchronization now showed signs of confusion, some stopping entirely while others continued their previous maneuvers. Now! Amelia shouted. All remaining ships, concentrate fire on the secondary nodes. The Prometheus and Starfire unleashed everything they had left. Kinetic rounds, the last of their plasma charges, even experimental weapons that had never been tested in combat. The damaged enemy network couldn't adapt quickly enough to the sudden assault, and 2 more node vessels exploded in cascade failures. The effect on the Dark Fleet was immediate and dramatic. Ships throughout the formation began to lose cohesion, their energy-absorbing fields fluctuating wildly. Some of the smaller vessels simply dissipated, as if they couldn't maintain their existence without the network's support. Hyperspace window opening, the navigation officer announced. The jamming field is collapsing. Signal Imperial Command, Amelia ordered. Full tactical report. Warn them that this is just the advance force of something much larger. As the Prometheus and the crippled Starfire prepared to jump to safety, Amelia took one last look at the long-range sensors. The effect she had seen earlier was still there, stars throughout the region continuing to dim as something vast moved through the cosmos. The voice had been telling the truth. This was just the beginning. Jump when ready, she said quietly. The stars elongated, and they were gone. The hyperspace journey back to Imperial space took 3 days, giving Amelia time to compile her report and try to process what they had witnessed. The Starfire had limped along beside them, her hull scarred and her power systems barely functional, but Captain Chen and her crew had survived. When they emerged near New Olympus, they found the Imperial fleet in full mobilization. Hundreds of ships filled local space, dreadnoughts, carriers, cruisers, and support vessels from across the Empire. Admiral Chen was waiting for them aboard his flagship, the massive Invincible. The debriefing took place in the Admiral's war room, a somber chamber where the Empire's greatest military minds gathered to discuss threats to civilization itself. Present were Fleet Admiral Chen, Admiral Torres from Intelligence, Admiral Park commanding Home Defense, and Admiral Kumar from Strategic Planning. "Give us everything, Captain," Admiral Chen said without preamble. Amelia activated the holographic display and began her report. She showed them the sensor readings from the dark ships, the energy absorption capabilities, the network structure that had allowed them to coordinate their massive fleet. But most importantly, she showed them the long-range sensor data that revealed the true scope of the threat. "This," she said, highlighting the star-dimming effect, "is what we're really facing. The fleet we encountered was just an advanced scout. There's something out there in the deep dark that's systematically consuming entire star systems. Admiral Torres leaned forward, studying the data. How many star systems are we talking about? Based on the rate of stellar dimming and the expansion pattern, I estimate they've already consumed at least a dozen galaxies beyond Andromache. The energy requirements for their technology suggest they need to feed constantly. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. They weren't facing a conventional enemy that could be negotiated with or defeated through superior tactics. They were facing something that viewed the entire universe as food. Recommendations? Admiral Chen asked. Immediate full mobilization of all Imperial forces, Amelia replied. Evacuation protocols for frontier worlds. And we need to develop new weapons. Conventional energy-based systems are not only ineffective, they actually strengthen the enemy. Admiral Kumar activated his own display, showing the current disposition of Imperial forces. We have approximately 8,000 capital ships available for immediate deployment, plus support vessels and planetary defense systems. Against an enemy that has consumed multiple galaxies. It won't be enough, Admiral Park finished. Not unless we can find a weakness we can exploit. Amelia had been thinking about this during the return journey. There might be one. The network structure, they're dependent on it for coordination and power distribution. If we could find a way to disrupt it on a large scale, that would require getting close to their main fleet, Admiral Torres observed. From your description, that would be suicide. Not necessarily. Amelia called up the tactical analysis she had prepared. They adapt to energy weapons, but they seemed confused by kinetic attacks. And the network nodes are vulnerable. We proved that. What if we used kinetic weapons exclusively, targeted their command structure? Admiral Chen studied the proposal. It's possible, but it would require a fundamental change in our tactical doctrine. Our crews are trained for energy combat. Our ships are designed around energy weapons. Then we change, Amelia said simply. Because the alternative is extinction. The next 6 months transformed the intergalactic empire from a peaceful civilization into a war machine. Shipyards throughout 17 galaxies worked around the clock to retrofit existing vessels and construct new ones designed specifically for kinetic warfare. The beautiful energy weapons that had symbolized Imperial technology were stripped out and replaced with massive rail guns, missile launchers, and projectile systems. Amelia found herself promoted to Admiral and placed in command of the newly formed Deep Strike Fleet, vessels designed to penetrate enemy formations and eliminate network nodes. Her flagship was the Nemesis, a purpose-built dreadnought that was more railgun than ship. The Imperial scientific community had also mobilized, working to understand the enemy's technology and develop countermeasures. Dr. Sarah Kellinson, the Empire's leading expert on exotic physics, had made a breakthrough that gave them hope. We've analyzed the energy patterns from your sensor recordings, she explained to Amelia during a briefing at the Imperial Research Station. The enemy's power absorption is based on a quantum effect that operates in a specific range of energy states. But there's a window, a narrow band where our weapons might actually damage them. She activated a holographic display showing complex mathematical formulas. If we can modulate our kinetic weapons to vibrate at specific frequencies while maintaining their physical impact, we should be able to disrupt their energy absorption fields. It was a slim hope, but it was something. The new resonance kinetics were incorporated into every weapon system being deployed with the fleet. Meanwhile, the evacuation of frontier worlds had begun. Millions of civilians were being relocated to safer regions, though safe was a relative term when facing an enemy that consumed entire galaxies. The border worlds closest to Andromache space had already been abandoned entirely. Their populations moved to heavily defended core systems. As Amelia stood on the observation deck of the Nemesis, watching the vast fleet assemble in the space around New Olympus, she reflected on how quickly everything had changed. 6 months ago, the Empire had been at peace, confident in its power and security. Now they were preparing for a war that could determine the fate of all sentient life in the universe. Admiral, came the voice of her new flag captain, Captain Sarah Morrison. Signal from Fleet Admiral Chen. All commands report ready for deployment. Amelia took one last look at the peaceful blue-white world below, its surface dotted with the lights of billions of citizens who were depending on them. Signal the fleet. Prepare for hyperspace jump to staging area Omega. Operation Dark Strike is now active. Staging Area Omega was a carefully chosen system on the edge of Imperial space, close enough to Andromache to serve as a forward base but far enough from populated worlds to avoid civilian casualties if the operation failed. The system's primary star was a red dwarf, providing minimal illumination for the massive fleet that now filled local space. 1,200 capital ships, support vessels, supply trains, and mobile repair stations had assembled for what everyone knew might be the Empire's final gamble. The fleet was organized into three main elements: Admiral Park's main battle fleet, designed to engage the enemy's primary forces; Admiral Kumar's support fleet, tasked with protecting supply lines and providing covering fire; and Amelia's deep strike fleet, whose mission was to penetrate to the heart of the enemy formation and eliminate their command structure. The plan was ambitious and desperate in equal measure. Long-range reconnaissance had confirmed that the Dark Fleet was larger than they had initially estimated, at least 10,000 vessels of various sizes, with more arriving constantly as they continued to harvest energy from consumed star systems. The Imperial fleet was outnumbered roughly 8-1. Our only advantage, Admiral Chen explained during the final briefing, is surprise in the fact that they don't yet know we've adapted our tactics. They'll expect us to use energy weapons, which will feed their absorption systems. Instead, we hit them with everything kinetic we have, focusing on their command nodes. Amelia studied the tactical projections on the holographic display. Intelligence had identified what appeared to be a massive command vessel at the center of the enemy formation, a ship the size of a small moon that seemed to coordinate the activities of the entire fleet. "If we can take out that command ship," she said, "it might cause a cascade failure throughout their network. But getting to it means fighting through their entire defensive screen. That's why you're taking the fastest ships we have," Admiral Chen replied. "Hit and run, maximum speed, minimal engagement until you reach the center. The main battle fleet will provide distraction." It was a good plan, as far as desperate plans went. But they all knew the odds. "Final intelligence update," Admiral Torres announced, activating her own display. "Long-range sensors confirm the enemy has established a forward base in the Andromache system. They appear to be using it as a staging area for their advance into Imperial space. If we don't stop them here, they'll be at our border worlds within weeks." The weight of responsibility settled on everyone in the room. This wasn't just about military victory. It was about the survival of everything they had built over centuries of peace and cooperation. "All fleet commanders, prepare your vessels for combat," Admiral Chen said formally. "May the stars guide us home." The Imperial fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Andromache system like an avalanche of metal and determination. Immediately, long-range sensors detected the Dark Fleet, a massive cloud of energy-absorbing vessels that filled the space around the system's primary worlds. "Contact," reported the sensor officer aboard the Nemesis. "Enemy fleet bearing everywhere, Admiral. Estimated 12,000 vessels." Amelia felt her stomach clench. The reconnaissance estimates had been conservative. They were facing odds of 10-1. "Signal from Admiral Chen," Captain Morrison announced. "Execute Operation Dark Strike." The Imperial fleet split into its component parts with practiced precision. Admiral Park's main battle fleet, consisting of 800 heavy ships, accelerated toward the center of the enemy formation, their hulls bristling with kinetic weapons. Admiral Kumar's support fleet spread into a defensive screen, ready to protect the supply lines and provide covering fire. And Amelia's deep strike fleet, 200 of the fastest, most heavily armed ships in the Imperial Navy, began their run toward the heart of darkness. The Dark Fleet responded immediately. Energy-draining beams lanced out across space, but this time they found little to feed on. The Imperial ships had shut down all non-essential energy systems, running on minimal power and relying entirely on kinetic weapons. "First salvo away," reported the weapons officer. Resonance kinetics, full spread. The Nemesis shuddered as her massive rail guns spoke. Projectiles accelerated to a significant fraction of light speed streaked toward the nearest dark ships, their molecular structure vibrating at the frequencies Dr. Kellenson had calculated. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Where before, kinetic weapons had only minimally damaged the enemy vessels, the resonance kinetics tore through their hulls like paper. Dark ships that had seemed invulnerable began to explode in brilliant flashes. "Direct hits!" the weapons officer shouted. "Enemy vessels are taking significant damage." Across the fleet, similar results were being reported. The new weapons were working, giving the Imperial forces their first real chance against the Dark Fleet. But the enemy adapted quickly. As the battle progressed, Amelia could see changes in the Dark ships' behavior. Their energy absorption fields began to fluctuate, trying to find a frequency that would neutralize the resonance kinetics. "They're learning," she muttered. "All ships, increase rate of fire. We need to hit them before they adapt." The Deep Strike fleet pushed deeper into the enemy formation, their path marked by the wreckage of destroyed Dark ships. But for every enemy vessel they eliminated, more seemed to take its place. The Dark Fleet was vast, and their own numbers were dwindling. "Admiral," Captain Morrison called out, "I'm reading massive energy buildups throughout the enemy fleet. Something big is coming." On the tactical display, Amelia could see the pattern forming. The Dark ships were repositioning themselves, creating clear firing lanes that all pointed toward the Imperial fleet. Whatever they were planning, it was going to dwarf anything they had unleashed so far. "Signal all ships," she ordered. "Maximum acceleration. We need to reach that command vessel before." The Dark Fleet fired. It wasn't individual ships launching attacks, it was the entire fleet acting as a single weapon. Thousands of energy beams converged on precise points in space, creating zones of absolute darkness that seemed to eat light itself. Where the beams intersected, reality appeared to tear, creating brief windows into the void that existed between universes. "Evasive maneuvers!" Amelia shouted, but several Imperial ships were caught in the convergence zones. They didn't explode, they simply ceased to exist, as if they had never been there at all. 50 ships lost," came the report from the Fleet Coordination Center. "No survivors, no debris. They've been erased." The surviving ships of the Deep Strike fleet continued their charge, but now they were racing against time. The Dark Fleet was preparing another convergence attack, and this one would be even more devastating. "There!" Captain Morrison pointed to the tactical display. The command ship. Ahead of them, dominating the center of the enemy formation, was the vessel they had come so far to destroy. It was enormous, easily the size of a small moon, and completely black except for patterns of energy that flowed across its surface like luminous veins. Around it, hundreds of smaller vessels moved in perfect synchronization, their actions coordinated by the massive command ship's intelligence. "All ships, concentrate fire on the command vessel," Amelia ordered. "Everything we have." The remaining ships of the Deep Strike fleet opened fire simultaneously, their resonance kinetics converging on the massive target. The command ship's surface rippled as the weapon struck, but it was so large that even their concentrated firepower seemed insignificant. "Minimal damage," the weapons officer reported. "We need to get closer." But getting closer meant running a gauntlet of defending ships, and the Dark Fleet was preparing another convergence attack. On the display, Amelia could see the energy patterns forming again, creating targeting solutions that would encompass her entire remaining fleet. It was then that she made the decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. "All ships except the Nemesis, withdraw immediately. Get clear of the convergence zone." "Admiral?" Captain Morrison looked at her in shock. "What about our mission?" "I'm completing it." Amelia turned to address the bridge crew. "Set collision course for the command ship. Maximum acceleration." The bridge fell silent as the implication sank in. They were going to ram the enemy command vessel, using the Nemesis herself as a kinetic weapon. "Signal the fleet," Amelia said quietly. Tell them it's been an honor." The Nemesis accelerated toward the massive command ship, her engines straining to build the velocity needed for a catastrophic impact. Around them, the Dark Fleet's defending vessels tried to intercept, but the Imperial dreadnought was too fast and too heavily armored to be stopped. "Impact in 60 seconds," Captain Morrison reported, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "All hands prepare for collision," Amelia announced over the ship's communication system. "It's been a privilege to serve with each and every one of you." The command ship grew larger in the viewports, its dark surface now revealing incredible complexity. Patterns of energy that seemed to pulse with malevolent intelligence, structures that defied conventional understanding of physics, and what appeared to be vast sections dedicated to processing and storing the energy harvested from consumed worlds. 30 seconds. Amelia could see their target now, a cluster of energy nodes near what appeared to be the command ship's center. If they could hit those directly, the resulting cascade failure might cripple the entire Dark Fleet. 15 seconds. The bridge crew braced for impact, but Amelia stood at the forward viewport, watching as they approached their target. In these final moments, she thought about the empire they were fighting to protect, the billions of lives that depended on their success, and the possibility that this sacrifice might give their people a chance to survive. Impact! The collision was beyond description. The Nemesis, traveling at a significant fraction of light speed, struck the command ship with the force of a small star. The exotic matter of the enemy vessel's hull met Imperial durasteel and quantum-reinforced armor in a meeting that briefly outshone the system's primary star. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the command ship began to shake apart. The energy patterns that had flowed across its surface became chaotic, cascading failures that spread throughout its massive structure. Explosions erupted across its hull as internal systems overloaded, and the vessel's own immense size worked against it. The damage from the impact spread faster than its repair systems could compensate. The effect on the Dark Fleet was immediate. Ships throughout the formation began to lose coordination, their movements becoming erratic as the command network collapsed. Some vessels simply stopped functioning entirely, drifting powerless through space. Others turned on each other, their energy-draining weapons firing at random targets. But Amelia wasn't there to see it. The bridge of the Nemesis had been vaporized in the impact, along with Captain Morrison, the crew, and Admiral Amelia Vasquez herself. Admiral Chen watched from the bridge of the Invincible as the Dark Fleet tore itself apart. The destruction of the command ship had indeed caused a cascade failure, but the result was even more dramatic than they had hoped. Without the controlling intelligence to coordinate their actions, the dark ships began consuming each other, their energy absorption systems draining power from nearby vessels in an ever-expanding spiral of destruction. "My God!" whispered Admiral Park. "They're eating their own fleet." Within hours, the massive armada that had threatened to consume the Empire was reduced to scattered debris and powerless hulks. The few surviving vessels fled toward the outer system, their threat neutralized. But the victory had come at a terrible cost. The Deep Strike fleet had been virtually destroyed, with fewer than 50 ships surviving the engagement. Admiral Amelia Vasquez and thousands of other brave souls had paid the ultimate price. "Signal Imperial Command," Admiral Chen said solemnly. "The immediate threat has been neutralized. But this is only the beginning." He was right. Long-range sensors still showed the effects of continued stellar consumption in the deep dark, indicating that the Dark Fleet they had defeated was indeed just an advance force. Somewhere in the cosmic night, something vast and hungry continued to feed, growing stronger with each world it consumed. But they had bought time, precious time to prepare, to develop new weapons, to forge alliances with other galactic powers who now faced the same threat. The Empire would survive, and perhaps, eventually, they would find a way to push back the darkness entirely. In the months that followed, Admiral Amelia Vasquez became a legend throughout the Empire. Her sacrifice at the Battle of Andromache was commemorated in monuments on 1,000 worlds, her tactical innovations were studied at every military academy, and her name became synonymous with the courage and determination that had saved civilization itself. But in the quiet moments, Admiral Chen often wondered if she would have approved of the legend that grew around her. Amelia had been a practical officer, more concerned with results than recognition. She had done what needed to be done, when it needed to be done, because that was her duty. And perhaps that was the greatest lesson of all, that sometimes, the fate of the universe rested not on grand strategies or superior technology, but on the willingness of ordinary people to do extraordinary things when everything they loved was at stake. 5 years after the Battle of Andromache, the intergalactic empire had transformed itself into something unprecedented, a civilization at peace that was also permanently prepared for war. Every world maintained defensive systems capable of kinetic warfare, every ship was equipped with resonance kinetic weapons, and every citizen understood that they lived under the shadow of an enemy that might return at any moment. Dr. Sarah Kellinson, now Director of Deep Dark Research, stood in her laboratory aboard the orbital station Amelia Vasquez, watching long-range sensor feeds that monitored the cosmic frontier. The stellar consumption had stopped, for now, but they all knew it was only a matter of time. "Any changes?" asked Admiral Morrison, Sarah Morrison, who had survived the destruction of the Nemesis when she evacuated with the other deep strike vessels, and had since been promoted to lead the Empire's early warning network. "Nothing significant," Kellinson replied. "But the mathematical models suggest they're still out there, still growing. Eventually, they'll have consumed enough energy to make another attempt on our galaxy." Morrison nodded grimly. It was a truth they all lived with. The enemy was patient, methodical, and had unlimited time to prepare. But so did they. "At least we know we can hurt them now," Morrison said. "Amelia proved that." "Yes," Kellinson agreed, looking at the holographic memorial that occupied one corner of her laboratory, a perfect reproduction of Admiral Amelia Vasquez as she had appeared on the bridge of the Prometheus during their first encounter with the Dark Fleet. "She showed us that they can be beaten. Now we have to make sure we're ready when they come back." Outside the station's viewports, the stars shone with their eternal light, beautiful and fragile in the cosmic darkness. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of even their most powerful sensors, an ancient hunger waited and planned. But the Empire would be ready. They had to be. Because in the end, that was what civilization meant: the willingness to stand against the dark, to fight for the light, and to sacrifice everything if necessary to protect the things that made life worth living. Admiral Amelia Vasquez had understood that truth, and her legacy would endure as long as stars burned in the sky.